Today's story takes place in the summer of 1973, deep in the Adirondack mountains of New York. 4 young campers went into the woods. Only 3 came back. The man responsible would spend years convincing doctors he couldn't walk, escape prison inside a bucket of fried chicken, and die in the brush with a hit list in his cell. And 2 lawyers sat on secrets that rewrote American law. This is the story of Robert Garrow. There's a summer the people of the Adirondack Mountains have genuinely never gotten over, and most of the country never even knew that it was happening. It's 1973. Watergate is consuming everything. Nixon is sweating through press conferences while his entire administration unravels in real time. And most of America is watching it from their living rooms. But while that noise was filling every airwave, something much quieter and far more terrifying was building in the forests of upstate New York. Robert Garrow was born March 4, 1936, in Dannemora, New York, a tiny North Country town that sits directly alongside the Clinton Correctional Facility, one of the most formidable prisons in the state. It's not lost on anyone that this is where the story begins, in the literal shadow of prison walls. His father was a chronic alcoholic who beat his children with whatever was nearby. Belts, bricks, it didn't matter. Police were regular visitors to the Garrow farm in Mineville. By the time Robert was 15, authorities removed him from the home and sent him to a prison farm to work. A prison farm, as an intervention, for a 15-year-old boy. What it produced was a deeply isolated teenager with no therapeutic support, let alone with his own unraveling psychology in an institutional setting. He eventually joined the Air Force. That ended in a court-martial for stealing from a superior officer. Back in New York, he married a woman named Edith, had a son, found work as a mechanic in Syracuse. In 1961, he was convicted of first-degree rape of a 16-year-old girl and assault of her boyfriend. 10 to 20 years, paroled in 1968. Quick math, that's 7 years. He got a job working at a baking company in Syracuse. Co-workers described him as hardworking and powerfully built, 6'2". But by the early 1970s, whatever containment had existed was gone. In May 1973, he abducted and molested 2 young girls from a Syracuse ice cream stand and held 2 Syracuse University students who were hitchhiking against their will. Both students survived, but now he had court dates approaching, active parole, and nowhere good for any of this to go. On July 11, 1973, the day before he was due in court, Garrow disappeared. On that same day, 16-year-old Alicia Hauck vanished on her way home from school. She had been hitchhiking. Garrow picked her up, drove her to a secluded area near the Syracuse University Cemetery, and when she tried to run, he killed her with a hunting knife and buried her body behind a maintenance shack at Oakwood Cemetery. Then he drove north, toward the mountains, toward a wilderness he knew better than most people ever would. 3 days later, 23-year-old Harvard student Daniel Porter and his 20-year-old girlfriend Susan Petz were camping near Weavertown when Garrow found their campsite. He stabbed Porter to death. He took Petz captive. He held her for several days, assaulted her repeatedly, then killed her and dropped her body into a mine shaft in Mineville, the same town where he had grown up. Porter's body was recovered 6 days later. Susan Petz would remain missing for months, her family not yet knowing she was already gone. On July 29th, Garrow came upon 4 young campers near Wells, south of Speculator. 18-year-old Philip Domblewski was there with his friends Nick Fiorello, David Freeman, and Carol Ann Malinowski. Garrow tied all 4 to separate trees, close enough to hear each other but not to see each other. Told them he had killed before and he would do so again. Then he stabbed Philip while the other 3 listened. All 3 worked free of their bonds and ran. Garrow disappeared into the Adirondacks. His abandoned Volkswagen was found near the scene the next day. The license plate confirming the name law enforcement was now hunting across the entire region. What followed was the largest manhunt in New York state history. Hundreds of officers and state troopers pushed into the Adirondacks. Helicopters ran infrared sweeps at night. Campgrounds were evacuated, roads were blocked. And over loudspeakers mounted to these helicopters, authorities broadcast a recording on a continuous loop. The voice of Garrow's wife, Edith, playing on repeat over 6 million acres of forest, quote, "Honey, this is Edith. Won't you please come out? Leave your rifle in the woods." That's a very specific 1973 approach to a manhunt. Pretty unorthodox. Garrow stayed ahead of the search for 12 days, breaking into hunting camps for food and moving parallel to the roads to avoid checkpoints. In surrounding communities, the dread was something that locals described for decades as never fully lifting. Residents kept guns loaded by their doors. The state issued a public advisory telling anyone planning on an Adirondack trip to cancel, and anyone already there to leave. The summer tourist season simply stopped. A priest from North Creek named Father Ashline had the misfortune of bearing a strong physical resemblance to Garrow and was tackled and handcuffed by state troopers while just going about his daily life. A local man named Walt Cuniff was met with shotguns leveled over patrol car hoods because his vehicle resembled one connected to the case. Only a nearby officer who recognized him personally kept that from becoming something irreversible. Garrow was cornered on August 9th after police staking out his sister's home in Witherby followed his nephew through a thicket where Garrow was hiding. Conservation officer Hilary LeBlanc fired, striking Garrow in the foot, arm, and back. He was taken alive. And here's where the story becomes something American law schools are still teaching 50 years later. Frank Armani, a Syracuse attorney who had done minor prior legal work for Garrow, was appointed as defense counsel for the Domblewski murder. Armani brought in Francis Belge, a seasoned criminal defense attorney, to help build an insanity defense. During confidential client meetings, Garrow confessed to the murders of Alicia Hauck and Susan Petz and provided hand-drawn maps of where the bodies were located. Armani and Belge went to these locations. They found Susan Petz in the Mineville shaft. They found Alicia's remains in the Oakwood Cemetery. They photographed what they found, and then they told absolutely no one. For 5 months, they held that silence, while the families of both girls begged publicly for any information at all. Armani was a father himself. His daughter attended the same high school as Alicia Hauck's sisters. He knew Alicia's father personally. He described the experience later as playing God, holding the client's constitutional rights in one hand and the grief of a parent who simply wanted to know where his child was in the other. The attorneys offered to reveal these locations in exchange for Garrow being committed to a psychiatric facility. The district attorney refused. Trial proceeded. The secret came out in court in June 1974 when Garrow testified about the other murders as a part of his insanity defense. And a question Belge posed during testimony made it plain that the defense team had known about the bodies for months. Both attorneys were publicly condemned. Their practices collapsed. Armani suffered a heart attack under sustained death threats. Belge was indicted for failing to report a death, though a judge ultimately dismissed the charges while acknowledging that Belge had honored his legal obligation at extraordinary personal cost. Garrow was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 25 years to life. He was not finished. While incarcerated, he faked paralysis so convincingly over such a sustained period that medical staff transferred him to the medium-security Fishkill Correctional Facility, which housed elderly and disabled inmates, lower security, which was the point. On September 8, 1978, his son, Robert Jr., smuggled a .32 caliber pistol inside of a bucket of fried chicken during a visit. Garrow rose from his wheelchair, scaled a 15-foot fence, and walked into the woods. When staff searched his cell, they found a hit list. Frank Armani's name was on it. Francis Belge's name was on it. The two men who had sacrificed their reputations and their health to uphold Robert Garrow's constitutional rights were the first people he planned to find and kill first. Armani responded by helping police build a psychological profile of Garrow's likely movements, suggesting he would stay near the woods surrounding the prison. 3 days after the escape, on September 11, 1978, corrections officers spotted Garrow in a shallow depression he had scooped out by hand in the brush near the facility. When they moved in, he opened fire and wounded an officer. The response was overwhelming. Robert Garrow was 42 years old when he was shot and killed. A map recovered from his Volkswagen years earlier had 26 red dots on it. 4 murders are officially attributed to him. The remaining dots have never been explained. The buried bodies case is now standard curriculum in American law schools and directly influenced the ABA's Model Rule 1.6, which now gives attorneys limited circumstances under which they may break confidentiality to prevent death or serious bodily harm. 2 attorneys did exactly what the law required of them and paid for it in ways the law never anticipated. And somewhere in the accounting of Robert Garrow's life, there are still dots on a map with no names attached to them. Thanks for listening to 10-Minute Murder, bingeable true crime stories. I'm Joe, I'm the host, and here's an email. Subject, listener suggestions pile. Joe, how many case suggestions are sitting in your inbox right now? I always wonder how you sort through all of that and decide what actually makes it onto the show. There has to be a system. Alyssa in Frederick, Maryland. And Alyssa, you would think there's a system, but there is not. There's definitely not a system. And it varies how long an email sits there before I read it. Like yesterday, I was literally responding to emails that were just coming in right in that moment. But then this one, Alyssa, your email, I'm sure you know, it's been sitting there for a few months. And it's nothing personal. Like 2 of my old friends that I've known for a very, very long time sent me an email, and it sat there for months without me even knowing that it was there until I responded to that one. I feel terrible about it, but it's just the way that it is when you get hundreds and hundreds of emails. You do the best that you can. I do 100% read every single email. Now, I can't respond to all of them because that's all I would ever be doing is just responding to emails, but I do read them all. And then those cases that are suggested from those emails, I'll do a quick look and see if it's something that I think would make a good possible case. And then I'll put it into a list in my notes app on my phone. And then later on, I'll go back into that list and I'll do more vetting to see if there's actually information out there that would make a good podcast episode. Hey, if you're a brand new listener to this podcast, make sure you hit subscribe right now. Then you can go to 10minutemurder.com and send me an email that I will read. I'll definitely read it. And you can also sign yourself up for the 10-Minute Murder weekly newsletter that I send out. If you've been listening for a while and you enjoy the podcast, make sure you rate it 5 stars wherever that's possible. Share it with your friends and your family. And also check out my new podcast. I'm pretty excited about this new project, True Crime Blueprint. It's deeper dives into some of the cases that are the most interesting to me. I do deeper dives into those cases. There's no time constraint on that, where this one is 10 minutes. This one is till I get tired of talking. So check that out wherever you listen to this podcast, True Crime Blueprint. All right, that's going to do it. That's your episode for today. Thank you again for listening to 10-Minute Murder. See you next time.